Welcome everyone back to Weekly Weather Updates, and in today's first video we're going to do another winter 2021-2022 look ahead. We're going to sort of specifically look at what is going on in the stratosphere for this video, as at the moment we do have a little bit of a stratospheric warming going on, one that's originating across Siberia, parts of Canada and Alaska, as you can see on this latest GFS run. So we'll have a look at that. We'll go have a look at what else is happening with the zonal winds at 10 HPA. We'll also have a look at some ECMWF long-range forecasts. And of course, at the end of the video, we'll have a bit of fun and look at the CFS look ahead for the next few months, which is, again, very experimental, very unlikely to happen, but it could show us some very interesting charts throughout the winter. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and do remember to follow on Twitter as well. The link's in the description. So we do run through the latest GFS at 10 HPA. We'll have a look at the current temperatures. Now, if you don't know what exactly we're looking at, we're basically looking at a snapshot of the temperatures at the pressure level of 10 HPA in the atmosphere. That level is the stratosphere, which is many, many miles above our head. However, it takes quite a big role in what sort of weather we do see in the UK. You can see at the moment we've got this blue colour of very cold air getting down to sort of minus 60, minus 70 degrees over the North Pole. Now this is what is called the stratospheric polar vortex. It's a very cold pool of air sitting over the stratosphere from around October, sort of September, October time, all the way until maybe March, April, May time, when we do finally see it warm up. Now it is a low pressure system that sits above the Arctic, spiralling winds in from the west. In the Northern Hemisphere. So that basically means the winds are coming in from the Atlantic, and it's one of the drivers of the jet stream at the tropospheric level where our weather takes place. So generally, if we have a powerful polar vortex at 10 HPA up in the stratosphere and through the other layers of the atmosphere, we will also probably see a correlation with the jet stream being stronger than average, bringing in westerly, mild, stormy weather. However, if we see disruption in this polar vortex, and it likely to sort of go through the atmosphere, that's when we see amplification in the jet stream, blocking patterns, potentially colder plunges of air, northerly, easterly winds, etc. We could also see sudden stratospheric warmings, where we see this polar vortex completely displaced or broken apart, and that's when we could see very interesting events, such as the Beast from the East from 2018, or we even saw stratospheric warming earlier this year, back in January, which gave us that very cold week where we saw bitterly cold easterly winds with temperatures hardly getting above freezing for about 7 to 10 days in a few spots. So at the moment you can see the stratospheric polar vortex, it looks relatively strong, however it actually is weak for this time of year. You can see the warming taking place across Siberia, Alaska and Canada, at only minus 40 degrees, so it's very cold still, but nevertheless it is warming, high pressure trying to displace the polar vortex. Now if we run through the GFS, you can see it doesn't really make too much progress. However, it is still disrupting the general pattern, and we're already seeing the effects of this warming at the surface level. We're seeing a lot of amplification in the jet stream, and do stay tuned for my sort of 7 to 10 day plus forecast that I'll put out later, or at least this evening, where we can see the big amplification that is caused, or one of the reasons for that is because of this warming, which is disrupting the polar vortex, giving us this amplification. We can also have a look at the 10 HPA wind, which is the general circulations, and you can see the polar vortex over the North Pole, these yellow colours showing where it's very strong winds, and you can see these other circulations around the polar vortex trying to disrupt it, and that is what is causing the changes at our level. If we do continually run through, you see that warming does decrease in strength, but it still stays there across Siberia, putting strain on the polar vortex. And remember, the UK, we are quite far north in terms of latitude. Sometimes people do forget how far north we are. We're in line with sort of central Canada, where we see temperatures readily below freezing. So it doesn't take a lot really, if we do steer the winds in from the north or the east for a few days, to see something very, very cold. So even though this doesn't look like a major sudden stratospheric warming, which brings sort of beast from the east patterns or anything major like that, it is still an interesting thing to be seeing sort of end of October. And if this is a pattern that continues to be seen over the coming weeks and the next month or so, it could start to give some interesting things at the end of November, early December. And at this stage, that is what is looking likely to potentially be our first chance of seeing anything wintry. Beyond that, you see that warming does maintain over sort of Siberia. Doesn't put too much strain. You can see the polar vortex is a bit strung out and is not particularly cold. Has been a lot colder this time of year. And beyond that, it does get displaced towards the Siberian side. Now, again, that is not major for the UK, but if that does slowly make its way through the atmosphere, it does hang around there for long enough, we do see the tropospheric polar vortex, which is the general very cold area from the North Pole, displace sort of to Siberia, Scandinavia. It does mean whenever we do see amplification in the jet stream, whenever we do see northerly or easterly winds, it will be just that little bit colder. And remember, these things do have downstream effects a couple of weeks, if not a month, after we see at the stratosphere. So these things right now are not going to directly impact our weather next week or even the week after. It's middle to end of November we could see effects of this change. So again, it's just something we're going to be keeping an eye on in the coming weeks and the coming months, and it is one of the main climate drivers over the winter. If we do have a look at the zonal mean winds at 10 HPA, this is basically a graph showing how strong those westerly winds are at or in and around that polar vortex. You can see at the moment the green colour is what is forecast by the GFS ensembles to 384 hours throughout the GFS ensembles. That's pretty much what we just saw on that chart, just out to the next sort of 14 days or so. You can see it's well below average, if not getting down to sort of record levels below average, before it does sort of trend up towards average, but still majority is staying below what we normally see this time of year. This time of year, it is normally rapidly strengthening, and last year you can see by the dotted red colours, it was very, very strong through November, December, before we did see a major southern stratospheric warming throughout early January, which caused the very cold conditions in February, as we said at the start of the video. You can also see these purple and blue colours, which are the CFS and the CF bias corrected. So the CFS has been known to have a bit of a bias towards sort of weaker than average zonal winds. So they have put a bias corrected lines on, which is, as it says here, is a beta, so it's not 100%. It's not definitely correcting the bias, it may be overcorrecting it. But if we do first just have a look at the uncorrected, you can see the majority are well below mean, some going even to reversal of the zonal winds around end of November, early December, and once again others going late December, early January. So those would be sudden stratospheric warmings and would propagate through the atmosphere, potentially giving us very cold conditions. But pretty much all are staying around or below, or quite far below average, and most are actually going to record levels below average at times. But if we do go to the bias corrected, you can see that bias is changed a bit. You can see over the next month, throughout November to early December, the majority still have it well below average. A few getting to around or maybe just a touch above average, but the majority are staying well below average. Now again, CFS is not going to be the most accurate. These are ensemble runs, they're not done at particularly high resolution, so there is still subject to change. But these are things we can look at, and you can see throughout November, early December, the polar vortex does look like it's going to be pretty weak, and there are even one or two runs going below zero, so a reversal, so easterly winds, which would very much increase the chances of colder weather. Beyond that, through December into early January, you can see a lot of them go back to around average, or even some going record levels above average. Again, takes with a pinch of salt, because of course, every sort of week or month we go on these ensembles, it becomes a little bit more inaccurate as we see more extrapolation and things go out a little bit, can go a little bit bonkers in the longer term. So don't take those exact, but it does signal potentially strengthening during sort of the middle of winter, and that's something we'll need to take into account over the coming weeks. But at the moment, we really are looking end of November, early December for the chances of seeing something colder, and I'd say at the moment we have an above average chance that we would normally have seeing something cold towards the end of November and early December. It's not guaranteed, but looking at what's happening with the stratosphere, what we're seeing on the surface at the moment with a lot of amplification in the jet stream, I wouldn't be surprised to be seeing potentially some early winters, especially further northwards throughout the end of November and early December. And as we saw with the December to remember in 2010, we did see very cold conditions throughout November and really throughout December as well, even to low-lying areas in southern England. So it is possible, even though it generally doesn't happen too often. I'd say this year we do have an above-average chance, though, of seeing something colder. If we also have a look at the mean winds, this is taking a slice through the atmosphere of the zonal winds. So you can see the 10 HBA level on the left here. And you can see the winds at the moment are around sort of 15 meters per second, which is not as strong as we'd expect this time of year, as you saw by the charts a minute ago. And you can see on the right the anomaly zonal winds, and you can see generally in the upper levels of the atmosphere, we're seeing good 10, 20 meters per second slower than we would normally be seeing this time of year. So you can see these blues are showing anomalies, negative anomalies, so slower than average. Towards the surface, you can see a lot more complicated, all the way down to surface level. But of course, that's because it's taken into account surface lows and all these other little systems taking place. Whereas higher up in the atmosphere, it's the big polar vortex really that's controlling things. But you can see over the coming few weeks, this only goes out to the end of October, so it is only a 2 to 3 week forecast. So it's not showing us what we're going to be seeing in a month's time, but it does show you what the state of the atmosphere is at the moment. You can see a lot slower winds up in the higher levels of the atmosphere, which would encourage the potential for blocking. And these patterns don't switch very quickly. If we were going to see above average zonal winds, we would be seeing that in the models now for 2, 3, 4 weeks time, and we're not seeing that. So it's safe to say it does look like we're going to be staying below average in terms of mean winds at the upper levels of the atmosphere throughout at least the next 3, maybe 4 weeks. You can see at times these will drop down into the atmosphere, and you can see towards the end of October we are seeing the potential at more surface levels to be seeing these zonal winds drop down to negative. But again, it's just something we really need to keep an eye on at this stage. It's just important having a look at what's happening at the upper levels of the atmosphere, because of course at the surface level there are a lot more factors that take into account. The levels really high up only really drive it in the sort of the longer term, and we'll just have to keep an eye what happens with the short range forecast as we head through November into early December. So we do have a look at the ECMWF long range forecast. Now, if you are very interested in this, you can go have a look at their website. They've got a lot more data than this, but I only really want to just have a look at the mean sea level pressure, so what we're going to be seeing at the surface throughout the next few months. Again, similar to the CFS, it is experimental. It's not meant to be taken literally, and this is a forecast that was made a few weeks ago on the 1st of October. And is valid for November, December, January, so in 3 months pattern. So it doesn't guarantee this is the pressure pattern we're going to see for all 3 months, but it gives us a general of most likely with sort of oranges and reds being higher pressure and blues being lower pressure. So you can see through November, December, and January, at the moment for the UK, it does look like there's going to be a lot of high pressure out in the Atlantic. Now, that's not a guarantee for cold weather. It's more likely to be sort of a northwest-southeast alignment jet stream, but it does mean at times we could see big amplification, northerly winds, and there's even some high pressure to our north and towards Scandinavia as well, just little pockets, which could mean we could, within this ECMWF seasonal run, there could have been a bit of Scandinavian high building up at times throughout the next 3 months. So it's a bit of a mixed signal. No massive signal of a polar vortex of doom where we would see big blues over Greenland, but it's not showing massive blocking all the time, which to be honest, for the UK, we wouldn't really expect. If we are going to be seeing blocking, it probably is only going to last for a week or two. We see a breakdown and maybe some more blocking a week or two later. So it is likely, it isn't guaranteed that because this isn't showing massive blocking, we're not going to see blocking at times. If we do move on the forecast to December, January, February, for the actual wintry months, we see a lot more high pressure out in the middle of the Atlantic up towards Greenland, and that would be encouraging for the potential for northerly winds. But at the same time, we have high pressure over the top of the UK, which could at times also mean that the jet stream is displaced a bit further northwards, which could mean we could be dragging in southerly or southeasterly winds at times. And again, it all depends on the orientation of these pressure charts. It is an encouraging pressure chart if you're looking for a drier, colder winter. Again, as I said, if we saw a polar vortex of doom, we'd see big blues out in the Atlantic and towards Greenland. We're not seeing that, so it definitely does look like we're not going to be seeing massive stormy weather the whole time, and there is going to be plenty of high pressure, which of course could bring frosts, and of course, if we get it in the right places with blocking, could be seeing northerly, easterly winds and the potential for snow. If we do also now have a look at January, so January, February, March, again, very similar pattern with high pressure out the Atlantic. But because we're getting further out, the signals are getting weaker towards the UK. To our north, just white. So no real bias really in terms of above average pressure or lower pressure. So we'll really have to keep an eye really what happens, of course. And if we do finally have a look at February, March, April, so towards the end of the winter, you can see a lot more blues to the north. So potentially low pressure sort of bringing up again. And this would be a pattern where we'd see a lot of westerly winds. So yeah, we'll have to keep an eye really what happens with that in the longer term. Again, it is experimental, so it's subject to change. So if we finally do have a look at the CFS longer term forecast, it goes all the way out to the 30th of March. Now again, it's not accurate by any means. It's just one run with the data that's being fed in right now. So we're just going to look for trends, seeing what's going to happen. We'll run through it quite quickly, as I know this video is getting a little bit long. So yeah, we'll just get through this. So you can see a lot of application in the jet stream at the moment with low pressure around, looking quite stormy. And again, stay tuned for the video later where we could be seeing, where we'll have a look at the potential for some quite cold and unsettled conditions. Beyond that, as we head through the end of the end of October, with a lot of low pressure around. Again, still seeing these amplifications towards early November. We do actually see a bit of a direct northerly. Could be seeing some colder conditions bringing in there. We could even be seeing a bit of snowfall with big Greenland high. Looking quite cold with that. Very interesting to see that. And of course, that could be one sort of downstream effect of the warming we're seeing over the stratosphere in the weaker polar vortex. So this is a scenario we could see in mid-November, and it's just something we've got to keep an eye on. And that blocking continues with a lot of northerly winds before we do start to see westerly pattern take over, before we do build up a bit of a Scandinavian high, never really gets going. But as we head right towards the end of November, early December, we're seeing proper, bitterly cold northerly winds, going very cold indeed towards the start of December, going a lot more westerly beyond that, but still having a lot of colder sectors in, a few colder blasts here or there. And as we head towards Christmas, we do see easterly winds for Christmas, and this would be bringing in snow showers down the east coast. And as we head into Boxing Day, we could see low pressure trying to slide in from the Atlantic, coming up against the cold air, and we could be seeing heavy snowfall on its eastern edge. So the CFS run is really coming out quite cold for November and December. Beyond that, we do again see an easterly wind blasting in for the start of January. And beyond that, still seeing more and more colder weather. A lot of easterly winds moving in here. And as we head towards the end of January, still a lot more westerly though. Still got colder sectors, but a lot more westerly, less blocking around. And it does generally, even though there are quite a few colder sectors moving in, potentially bringing in some colder conditions at times, there's a lot of sort of stormy, low pressure sort of patterns where we see colder, warmer sort of polar maritime air masses sort of switching. So nowhere near as cold through January and February. Right towards the end, we start to build a Scandinavian high with some easterly winds. Doesn't really quite come off, and we maintain the sort of flip-flopping between milder and colder sectors. At sort of the 850 HPA, it looks pretty cold at times in the colder sectors, but on the surface, because it's not sustained, it's only moving through transient for 12 hours, it won't be that cold in reality. And right beyond that, we do continually see sort of westerly winds, a few little Scandinavian highs trying to build up at times, but generally nowhere near as cold as end of November and most of December was showing. So that's very interesting seeing that through the CFS. We saw that similarly on the update last week. So yeah, very, very interesting. And we'll have to stay tuned to what happens for the end of November, early December. As I said, I do believe we do have an above average chance this year of seeing something cold in end of November and early December, even into the middle of December. And of course, it would be beautiful if we did see a white Christmas. Many areas haven't seen one since sort of December 2010. So that will be very interesting to see if we do see that come off. Again, it's all up in the air. A lot of this stuff is experimental, and it does all have to be taken with a pinch of salt. But I hope you have enjoyed having a look at some of this data, and hope it does give it to you some encouragement that we do see something colder this winter. If you are one of those snow lover fans, if you're not, I'm not guaranteeing cold weather. I'm just saying there is probably an above average chance this year earlier in the season. As we saw by those CFS longer range at the 10 HPA and by this CFS run right to the end, it does look like maybe through January, February, things are turning a bit more Atlantic based, which would be a little bit milder, but also more unsettled. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.